It's been around 5 months since I've recorded my last story time, and honestly, I'm not mad at it. I'm currently sick though, which I don't know if you could tell. I'll play an audio of what I typically sound like when I get sick.
I just wanted to record what I sound like when I'm really sick.
Because I took medicine earlier. It's honestly not helping. Funny thing enough, my sibling actually, I sent him a voice memo. My sibling literally told me I didn't know Marge's sister had my phone number. And for some reason, it just made me laugh like the most. And then they proceeded to say that I sounded like a Rick and Morty character. So shout out to Toast if they watch this. But I thought it'd be funny to talk about the time I had the Rona, because it was quite the experience. And there's probably going to be the select few comments saying, oh, you're just playing it up to be scary, or oh, you're one of the people who are more likely to die from COVID anyway. And you know what? Fair. But everyone, has a different experience, and everyone's body is different and will react to COVID differently. But this is just my experience with it, and I'm not going to go too much into it because I honestly don't remember. It was kind of a blur. But I'll tell you like my symptoms and how I got it and the weird effects I had after, because I don't think people talk about that too much. So for some backstory, when I was 4 years old, in the middle of the night, I randomly stopped being able to breathe. My mom called 911 and I was rushed to the hospital, where they told my mom that I had asthma. So my body reacts horribly, okay, to getting sick. Even minor colds are horrible for me. Back in November, like late November of 2021, I went with my family for a work trip. It was for a work trip for them, but for me it was just like a typical vacation. While we were there, one of my or I guess it was on the way home, one of my younger cousins ended up cracking her head open with a jar because she was trying to reach for something and it ended up hitting her on the head. My auntie had to call the ambulance and she had to get stitches, which is pretty stressful. Fast forward to late January of 2022. There's a reason I brought that up, by the way. My cousins had went to like town for like dental stuff, and then a few days later had come to hang out with my little sister. Around January 26th, 2022, I think, I was playing Minecraft on an adventure map type thing, as one does. I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was this one. When all of a sudden I hear, Kirsten, come here now, which terrified me so bad. It made me think I did something actually horrible, like I killed someone and she found the body, So I paused the game to check what happened, and she ends up showing me a test. Not just any test, but a COVID test, where the results ended up being insanely positive. None of those like faint line like things either. Like it was insanely positive. All right. I asked whose it was, and she just points at my little sister who was playing, just chilling. And I immediately got terrified. My blood ran cold when I realized that I had been with her earlier in the day and was giving her smooches. Despite the fact that I didn't know she had Rona at the time, I was just kind of like, as one does. So what did I do, you might ask? I immediately ran and kissed her again. Gave her a little smooch, because I knew I was probably already infected by that point. So I just sealed my fate, pretty much. I guess my cousin had a headache or started getting sick, but because of the head injury I mentioned before, they all thought it was from that and not from the Rona. 2 days ended up going by, and we weren't getting any positive results on our COVID tests, but we were getting sicker. My mom ended up having, I think her first symptom was like a headache. So by the third day, we ended up just saying screw it, and we went to go get the tests done at the actual hospital lab thing. Where we live, it's called a health center, not like an actual hospital, they're very different things. But anyway, a critical piece of information to know is my mom is a nurse, so I had to stay relatively educated on COVID and the Rona, as I literally lived with a healthcare worker, or I still live with her. So when we had went to the health center to get tests done, the people who took our tests worked under my mom, so that was fun. I personally don't really have a gag reflex, so I was fine with the tests, because they had to do the nose one, which is honestly the worst one for me because it makes me sneeze, and then they had to do a throat one. And so I just kind of sat there and I was like, okay, well, I'm fine. But my mom, on the other hand, she's horrible at being a patient, and even worse at getting COVID tests done. After we got our tests done, we ended up going home, and I guess our machines worked really quick, because the second we got home, we both got a text. We were COVID positive. I remember I started to inform a lot of my like family members because I tend to update them when I get sick and stuff. I remember telling my dad over the phone, and his reaction was, "Really?" Like he was kind of like, "You have the Rona," and then he never called me again. It was the funniest. It was funny though. My mom and I actually were hit the worst with it, while my little sister was fine. Like she had probably like a fever. That was the first symptom that my mom noticed on her. Like she noticed she was getting sick and had a fever, so she decided to test her for funsies, to make sure that it wasn't the Rona, and it was. She was still able to play and have fun. Some of my symptoms, which I had to look up what the symptoms actually are. I did have a fever, which was really annoying. I had a cough. I was more tired than I think I've ever been in my life. I didn't lose my sense of taste or smell. I did have a very sore throat. Like it was so bad, it was like I was swallowing glass anytime I swallowed. And then it was like every time I breathed or swallowed, it was like I was drinking antiseptic and alcohol, which would like make it burn. It's like if you ever get like a injury of any kind and people put like antiseptic, if that's what it's called, like stuff on it, and it burns. It's literally what it felt like. Every time I breathed, it burned. Every time I swallowed, it burned really badly. It was the worst sore throat I've ever felt. Even with normal colds, if I have a sore throat, it takes me out. Like I could handle vomiting. I'm a metaphobic, and I would prefer vomiting over the sore throat stuff. I'd prefer it, honestly, as an emetophobic person. I did have the sore aches and pains and stuff. Worse, it was so bad. I didn't even want to get out of my bed. In the mornings, I sometimes couldn't even get out of my bed because I was so unbelievably sore. It was like I was tossed around like Loki in the Avengers movie. One of the weirdest symptoms that I had, which I am now figuring out that it's less common, but it is a symptom, was my eyes were really watery. It was kind of like I had the flu mixed with having allergies, which are two of the worst things in the world. Allergies are just the worst. And it was weird. Like my eyes were watery even though I wasn't crying or I wasn't having like around my like things that I'm allergic to. It was really weird. I did end up having like difficulty breathing and shortness of breath. It was really bad to where I literally couldn't do much because I would get out of breath very quickly. I'm also anemic, which is another symptom of being anemic, is just having shortness of breath, so it could have been from that. And I did have chest pain. It was quite bad. One of the things that I did want to talk about was how every morning I'd wake up, right? I'd wake up, and this happened like a few times, like maybe like for 3 days straight. I woke up and I couldn't breathe. My entire airways were filled with phlegm. They were swollen because, again, it's what asthma does. And so I would sit there gasping for air, couldn't even breathe. It's kind of like breathing through the smallest straw possible. And I remember one morning I had woken up. The first time that this happened, I ended up coughing because that's what I do when I can't breathe. Due to asthma related stuff, I tend to cough a lot more because it does help. My asthma, at least. And pretty much what happened was I ended up coughing exactly like I just did. And it was pretty much like I threw up phlegm. So much phlegm had come out of my chest and my airways that I literally closed my mouth and it filled my cheeks with phlegm, which is very gross, I'm aware, but that did happen, and it was the scariest thing. I remember I spat it into a bag and it filled up an entire corner of a like small plastic bag. Not plastic bag, like the garbage bags. It had filled a whole corner with just phlegm. And I woke up and did that every morning that I had COVID. I would wake up, cough up a whole bunch of phlegm, and then I'd be fine throughout the day. The sore throat kind of would subside for like a few hours in the day and then would come back. It got worse at day and night was the typical times that my COVID would get bad. So that was horrible. We did end up recovering from COVID. My mom's boyfriend, fiance now, was at work at the time, and I remember he had come home like while we were still COVID positive, and he didn't get COVID, which was like the weirdest thing. And he was sleeping in the same bed as my little sister and my mom, both who had COVID, and he didn't get it. And I just sat there and I was like, what kind of antibodies do you have that you just don't, you know? But one of the weird things was I actually ended up getting an inflamed rib from having COVID, which was not a fun experience. At least that's what I was told anyway. I had an inflamed rib, which is not fun. Still can't breathe properly. It's been like months. It's literally about to be a year since I had COVID, and I still cannot breathe properly. You might be asking yourself, Kirsten, did you take care of yourself when you had COVID? Absolutely not. I still streamed. I still posted content. I was still recording things, even with having the Rona. I actually got in trouble by my friend Mercury. He had ended up. I told him because I mod for him on Twitch, and I remember like he was just like, streaming, you should be sleeping and resting, and it was like the funniest thing in the world. Shout out to Merc. But yeah, that was just my COVID experience. My heart goes out to those who have suffered incredibly from COVID, or people who have lost people to COVID. My heart goes out to you guys. And you know, I pray that this disease disappears soon. You know, COVID is real. It is still a thing that is waging war on the world. So, you know, and my experience was just not the greatest one. I hope that you guys enjoyed this out of nowhere for not really good story time video, I guess. But yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.